Great. So thank you very much for that introduction and that setup. And you used a number of words and phrases that are really in line with what I call brain-wise ways of working. And in brain-wise ways of working, we do recognize that the brain works best when it feels safe, when it feels calm, when it's nourished, and when there's certainty. And this is really almost the exact opposite of the world and the working world that we find ourselves in at the moment. So from a brain-wise point of view, it's absolutely normal that people are struggling a little bit at the moment, and some people really struggling, and some people pushing through, activating all sorts of strategies to keep going and keep the family going and keep the schooling going and keep the work going. But also really a sense now that I'm finding with my clients of people saying, oof, it's getting a bit much, it's getting a bit heavy, and really we're being forced now, I think, to be very clear and explicit about how we embed well-being time and practices and ways of working throughout the organization. So this is not something that we just park on the side for people to do in their own time. It really needs to be something that we do together and that we take very seriously. And for you guys, it's all about creating spaces for others to work in, where well-being can be fostered and nurtured. And so maybe today is an invitation to think for yourselves as an organization, how is that playing out in your own working world and your own working experience? So I'm going to be dipping into a variety of tools and concepts and insights, that some of which are in two of those books there that you can see, and also some are within the programs that I offer to individuals, to organizations and teams. We're also offering them now to schools and young people. Because when we come from a brain-wise perspective, we recognize that we all have brains. And there's some certain things that happen in a brain, whether you're a 5-year-old or a 50-year-old or an 80-year-old. And what you do with it might depend on how old you are and what sorts of habits you've developed and who's in your network to help you be supported. But fundamentally, brains do work in a certain way. And if we can get some handle on not only how our own brains work, our own unique awesomeness, but also how we share these common experiences as humans with brains, then we can really start to make inroads and get some traction on new ways of working that I believe are and were already necessary even before COVID, but COVID has really illuminated now how we can work better together. My own story is I'm a neuroscientist, I'm a clinical psychologist, and my passion is martial arts. So for me, mindfulness in motion is really the core thrust of my work. And this means it's really accessible for people that haven't got time to stop, haven't got time to breathe. It's what I call the Bruce Lee methodology. We do our mindfulness in every movement that we make, and the gym is any environment that we find ourselves in. I don't need a special place to practice Kung Fu. It's nice to have. But if the Kung Fu is in my bones and in every cell of my body, then I know that I can do these practices and get the benefits of this approach in any way, shape or form. And that's what I teach to my clients, that's what I teach to my patients that I see clinically, to the leaders that I coach, and to the teams that I'm working with. And, working on Zoom, actually, we really need this because our bodies, our bodies and brains can be aching a little bit just from the intensity of being on calls and the ways of working at home, where we haven't got all our nice ergonomic setup perhaps organized in the way that we might have in the office. So today I'm going to be sharing just a taster of practices of the brain science and some of the insights that might be to mull over. Yeah, if you want to know more, we can go deeper, and Tina and I have been chatting about this. Let me give you just a little bit of a sample of things to get you thinking, to get you curious. and what catches your imagination or what tickles your brain or what your mind thinks like, actually, wow, this would really be helpful in our own work or in the workspaces that we're providing for others. Make a little note or drop a line in the chat box so we don't forget it. And then this may be something that we can pick up on in the questions, or we can pick that up later. You can pick that up with Tina. So, assuming that people do know how to use the chat box, please use that as a function to drop some insights. And I'll pause periodically to maybe come to that and definitely pick up on that at the end. So this is about fundamentally the intentions of creating nurturing environments for ourselves, you guys, for your clients and the people that use your spaces, but using yourselves as the experiment, as the data for thinking about what really works for me to create an environment where I can do the things that I need to do. And, today's session is about listening and learning. So, checking in with the environment that you're in now. And, it's difficult with kids running around in the background or needing to be doing tasks or having family around when we're trying to focus. So a more flexible approach is a brainwise approach that says, well, what am I actually needing to use my brain for now? What level of attention is required? Because 100% attention is a bit of a myth when we're working at home, and especially if there's kids around. And what are the conditions that will really allow me to use my brain in a way that gets the job done? And I work a lot with people with cognitive diversity, and we really zoom in on this to think about the environment that works for me is not necessarily the environment that works for everybody else. And that's something that's really important when we're designing new working environments, is taking into account cognitive diversity, but start with self, observing for myself and for my team. And me, I've got a brain that's a little bit different. It goes at a different kinds of speed than others, and it has some different requirements. I believe that's what makes my work great. So I know that it's helpful for me to have several different environments to do different sorts of tasks in. And I mix that up during the day. Self-awareness then is really the cornerstone of what we're talking about here. So this is how well do I know myself? And for me, that journey has been through mindful movement, through mindfulness, through psychology, through my own mentoring and coaching, my own psychotherapy, getting help to know myself, but also having practices that repeatedly drop me into my own body and mind space so that I can gather the data, my own sort of focus group, if you will, where there's one person in the focus group and it's me, and I'm trying to discover more about how I feel, how my mind is moving, and how that impacts on the tasks that I need to get done. It's not selfish navel gazing, it's very deliberate, intentional turning of the lens to the body and the mind in order to gather data that I can then use to know how best to drive my brain. Those of you that have touched base with EQ assessments, emotional intelligence training, self-awareness is the cornerstone of EQ. But then people get a bit stuck, like, okay, well, how do I actually do that? And for me, mindfulness training has been really the thing that's accelerated this. I did a variety of things, but mindfulness training really accelerated this. And we're going to drop into a mini applied practice in a moment where you can get a taste of this. And one of the things that comes from developing strong self-awareness is an understanding of how we function when things are not as we want them to be. And that's mostly where we find ourselves now as parents, as individuals, as businesses. It's not really optimum conditions right now. And the businesses and the individuals that will thrive in this moment and actually even maybe generate more insights and more opportunities for their business and for their self-development are those that can sit in the chaos of not knowing, sit in the chaos of changing guidelines every day about what we should or shouldn't do, changing recommendations from business leadership around what's going to happen or not going to happen in the future. And we were already dealing with Brexit as a business community, and just every day more and more is coming. So fundamentally this is about being okay when things are not. And it starts at the individual level, it's mirrored and flows out into the team level. It's modeled by the leadership of the organization, which is why working from the top down is really important. How do we look up and see our business leadership managing with uncertainty in skillful ways? One of those strategies is power through, and that sort of works for some people, but that's actually a strategy that's pretty harmful for other sorts of people. So we need flexible responding, and we need leadership demonstrating different sorts of behaviors so we can test and feel into what works for me. Is it pushing through? Is it sharing it? Is it a creative practice? Is it a team away day? Is it having a regular drop-in space where I can just put my hand on my head and say, what is going on? What is going on? It's a madness. And it's okay to say that. Not to get pulled in, not to get wallowing in it, but having the space to just say, wow, I'm not okay. I'm not okay right now. This isn't weakness. This is actually a strength to be vulnerable, and a trust in the capacity, the human capacity to move through this stuff. And actually, ultimately, it builds cohesion and congruence inside an organization. And then we've got the team building that really allows us to thrive and innovate when things are a little bit difficult. So let's turn the camera in right now, and perhaps your gaze is outward, perhaps you're focusing on some food and you're just listening to me, but I would suggest, if possible, turning the camera inwards, and how I would do that is by closing my eyes, because that really helps me to begin to turn my attention to the internal landscape. And we're going to drop into an exercise which I call the transitional pause, and this is really one of my top tips for people that I'll give you the brief version of it now. There's a SoundCloud audio that I'll send the link that you can use to play with this afterwards. But for now, following my guidance and listening to my voice, and perhaps closing the eyes as you take 3 breaths, and maybe even let's do 3 shoulder rolls, because maybe those will help us to tune into the body and just see how the body feels right now in terms of tightness and tension. Let's turn the camera inwards as we make these shoulder rolls and begin to be interested in the body. So when we have our face in a screen, our attention on reports and to-do lists and emails, we lose contact with our body. And this is how we can sometimes find it difficult to pay attention to the body and to notice how we feel. So rolling the shoulders backwards, eyes closed, and there may be a sense of being self-conscious. That's pretty normal. We're constantly working out what people think of us. That's the very natural thing that our brain does. Sometimes it gets a bit too carried away with that, but let's try to drop that pattern and say, I'm here for me today, and I'm interested in what my shoulders can tell me about how the day has been thus far. And if you need to keep moving, you can, but if you wish to just stay still, let's go now to a mini review of the day thus far and how the body feels. When we think about the conversations we've had, the meetings, the conversations, and we do this micro review day thus far. So I'm opening my mind to reviewing meetings, movements, conversations, and interactions. I'm gathering data from the mind and the body about how the day has played out and left its mark on the mind-body system. Not too much need to analyze, but a little light noting like, that was a bit tough actually, or that was good, that was a great meeting, or I felt good with that conversation. And having given a bit of space to that, let's zoom the attention now, perhaps with another shoulder roll to help us, coming back more into the body as it is here and now. For me, I like to drop my attention to feel the contact of the body against the chair, feeling of the bottom on the chair, the soles of the feet on the floor, maybe even wiggling the toes to get a sense of feet on floor, bottom on chair. Sometimes I place a hand on my tummy to feel the breath moving in and out. And saying to my attention network, okay, you're on a bit of a break now. Your only task is feel the breath, feel the toes, and pretty much everything else can wait. You can pick it up in 1 minute time, so it's not going to go anywhere. Taking a break, breathing in and out, and feeling the chair. Maybe if you're eating the lunch, you might be feeling the tummy and the food in the belly, or the coffee in the tummy. Just these. Anything else that comes to mind, you're a bit firm, you say, not now. I see you. Wow, busy monkey mind, I love you, not now. Maybe following 1 or 2 breaths really consciously. Really consciously breathing in, breathing out. Maybe you might know some yoga breaths here, those of you that practice. That's a little bit different than what I'm offering, but a slightly longer out breath can help to regulate the vagal nerve, activate this rest and restore system. So you could experiment with that now, slightly longer out breath. And then part 3, setting intentions for coming out of this practice. So maybe setting the intention to reorient to the presentation, to maintain curiosity, or any other intention you want to set to just provide that compass for your brain for the rest of the day. And I would suggest let's orient the intention towards self-care, perhaps. Have a little program running in the back of your brain that says, be on the lookout for little moments where I could drop into the body or do a transitional pause. Take a few breaths, roll my shoulders. And just 30 seconds of that now, setting intentions for the presentation, for self-care, whatever feels comfortable to you. And finishing with 3 breaths. Opening the eyes if you had them closed. So that's a practice I call the transitional pause, and I've run that for a variety of organisations, but it tends to be the ones with the organisations where people are literally rushed off their feet. And they say, I don't really have time to do anything, and I offer this a workshop around this to work with individuals and teams to think where they can insert this transitional pause that gives us a micro reflection, a micro grounding, and then most important of all, setting intentions for how to move forwards. And back in the days when we were moving about in the physical space, I was doing this geographically, so offering it between work and home, between sites, if you're visiting a lot of different sites, between rooms, meeting rooms and open plan spaces. More so now, we're using it for these cognitive transitions as we transition perhaps between tasks that require certain types of attention or a certain quality of attention. And also transitioning between emotional tasks. So this might be more for managers, for example, going into a performance review, really making sure that they're managing their own state before they go into an emotionally charged situation, or a place where it might be necessary to get into a little bit more the emotional layer, delivering feedback, or perhaps delivering some what would be considered bad news to people. And this transitional pause, when it's done, when it's practiced, can be done in just 3 breaths, but it does take a little bit of training to get into it. It's used at the beginnings of meetings, and 5 minutes there can make the next 45 minutes something that really has a different quality. So it's a really flexible brain-wise tool that does a lot of things in one hit, and it's one of my top sellers. Working, a kind of a whole workshop around that. And this is what I call brain-wise ways of working. It's bringing neuroscience insights into the working practice. And one of the insights that's really powerful to share with people is that your brain is operating fundamentally at any one time in one of 3 different modes. And at work we're often in the drive mode. We've got to get things done. There's a million things to do. We've got a massive to-do list. We've got things to do at home now. We've got loads of extra tasks that we didn't have to do. We've got some tasks that we no longer have to do, like the commute, for example. But we need to kind of commute in different ways now that we're working at home. And a typical working day actually is quite a lot of the drive system being activated, and often not very much of the soothing or the rest and restore system. And in our current working practice now, we've got a huge load of threat system activations. So these are the 3 modes of the brain. The threat system, activated when we feel agitated or activated in ways that have a bit of a negative connotation.